You're listening to the Monocle Daily, first broadcast on the 2nd of July, 2025, on Monocle Radio.
The United States threatens again to leave Ukraine to fend for itself. A bewildered world counts down the days to the next US tariff deadline, and what refuges from the heat are available to un-air-conditioned Europeans. I'm Andrew Muller. The Monocle Daily starts now. Hello and welcome to the Monocle Daily, coming to you from our studios here at Midori House in London. I'm Andrew Muller. My guests Robin Lustig and Vincent McAvaney will discuss the day's big stories, and we'll find out how observantly modest Islamic fashion may find a foothold beyond the faith. Stay tuned, all that and more coming up right here on the Monocle Daily. This is the Monocle Daily. I'm Andrew Muller, and I'm joined today, or will be in due course, by Robin Lustig, journalist, broadcaster and former presenter of The World Tonight on Radio 4, and by Vincent McAvaney, the journalist, broadcaster and regular politics commentator here on Monocle Radio. But we will go first to Ukraine, from beneath which the United States appears again to have whisked the rug. The US has halted already agreed weapons and ammunition shipments to Ukraine, claiming to be concerned that America's own stockpiles are running low. Among the munitions that Ukraine will have to do without are the PAC-3 missiles, which enable Patriot air defense batteries to shoot down the drones and missiles which Russia has been launching at Ukraine in escalating quantities in recent weeks. Joining me now from Kyiv is the Ukrainian journalist Natalia Gumanyuk. Natalia, first of all, do we understand exactly what Ukraine is going to be missing out on here? How big a dent will this put in Ukraine's ability to defend itself?
We do understand. However, not everything is clearly public, because at this stage, still the Ukrainian government try to kind of negotiate, so that it's not yet the final decision. So there are no kind of strong comments. But if we understand, it's really about the missiles for Patriot, the batteries for the Patriot, and what is special, because it's something we are following for the last 4 or 5 months after the first moment when in early May already some kind of the American aid was withheld. Then it was a lot of people spent time to understand what is critical, and that's exactly what is critical and where the United States have the leverage, because it's quite a unique type of weapon which enables Ukraine to defend its cities from the supersonic and ballistic missiles. There are particular type of the supersonic and ballistic missiles, and the Patriots is the only more or less globally system which is capable to do so. If you really, lack artillery or lack something, it still can be substituted. But if there is the thing which is not, it's exactly this, which sounds quite cruel. But of course, we're speaking not about something imminent. It's not about tonight.
I mean, can you give us a sense of what the scale of Russia's drone and missile attacks on Ukraine over the last few weeks in particular? How big a step up has it been from what we've seen previously in the war?
Indeed, it's something we also were kind of expecting maybe in spring, but for the last months there were, and especially last weeks, there were a number of the strikes, and each of them was surpassing the previous one. And so in particular, one of the latest, a week before, around 10 days ago, in the end of June, there were almost 500 targets around the country. And it's quite a lot, because if you speak about a couple years ago, 12 rockets would be considered to be incredible. Then there would be 40. Then there would be over 100 or 200. But over 500, it's quite a lot. And we would speak about, for instance, 20 supersonic missiles, 20 ballistic missiles in different parts of the country. But then 300-400 of the Shahed drones. And the concern is that closer to autumn, the Russia would be capable to, and is scaling, so they would be capable to send kind of like even more hundreds of the drones simultaneously to exhaust air defense. You don't need exactly the patriots for that, but it's one of the part. Ukraine is actively working on kind of anti-air defense using the drones, but it's still in the development. So the Patriots itself is really something which is really enables the defense of the civilians' life around the country, and particularly in the capital as well.
I mean, what kind of reassurances has Ukraine's government been able to make about Ukraine's ability to cover that shortfall, in particular the PAC-3 missiles that go in the Patriots?
I think the Ukrainian government isn't trying to tell that it's possible to substitute, but for the last months, there were a lot of talks with European partners, in particular Germans and the others, to have something which helps, and it's really not enough. And also it's a bit of the different quality. So it's pretty unique what is going on if it happens. But if you speak about the domestic production, Ukraine is really working hard, the business, the military, the tech industry, on how you really build the different type of the air defense with the drones, but that might not help against the supersonic and some types of the supersonic and ballistic missiles, including those which are brought to Russia from North Korea.
And Natalia, this is obviously not the first time since Donald Trump returned to the White House that he has threatened to or actually paused assistance to Ukraine, whether that's been weapons, ammunition or intelligence. Now that they've done it again, how nervous does this make Ukrainians that they're being set up for the United States to walk away completely?
So Ukrainians are quite sober in terms of what they can count on from the U.S. For quite some time. I'm speaking about the time since last autumn, for instance. So it's not something imminent, but mainly the meeting in the unfortunate meeting in the Oval Office, and like some days after this withdrawal, which really happened on I don't want to be mistaken, but I would remember it was around the 3rd of March. There was the halt of the support. Since then, it was a bit like a false start. The country understood that it's not theoretical, it's practical. So the country was preparing for the for possible scenarios, but insisting every single time that there is something which can be substituted and which is defending civilian lives. That was the Patriot batteries. We also speaking about some capabilities to strike in depth into the Russian territory. That's also something Ukraine may miss. It would influence a lot. It might influence the situation on the ground because it allows Ukraine to stop the Russian, for instance, infantry earlier than they approach, stop them from the command and control, strike at the command and control centers, which is a very efficient way of waging the war and preserving a lot of human lives in the front line. So preparation is there, but the concern is the same. And I think in this, the government would be quite coherent. There is something unique about these Patriots. And if there is, and I've been writing myself for half a year, if there is one leverage the US can use against Ukraine is not allowing us and not providing us with something which just defends civilians' life in civilians' towns, including far from the front line. It's not about deep strikes into Russia. They can happen, they cannot. But this is something which is extremely cruel, as I said earlier.
Natalia Gumenyuk in Kyiv, thank you for joining us. You're listening to The Daily on Monocle Radio, and I am joined now by Robin Lustig and Vincent McAvaney. Hello to you both.
Hi. Hello.
Vincent, you have returned from Glastonbury, not, I'm assuming, wearing the outfit you currently are, which is very much dependent on sort of pale, clean beiges.
Yeah, I would not be in a white shirt in Glastonbury. Although we had amazing weather this year. There was one 10-minute drizzle one morning when we woke up. But apart from that, it was sunny and warm and absolutely lovely.
God, sounds sickening. No, I'm as regular listeners will be aware, I have a sense of bewilderment that people would spend their time and money to voluntarily attend Glastonbury. But you claim to have actually enjoyed yourself.
I loved it. I've been trying to go for like 10 years. It is so hard to get tickets. I think the rate now is about 2.5 million people try and get around to about 250,000 tickets. And it was really interesting listening. I listened to an interview with Emily Evis where she said, even 15 years ago, they weren't selling out. And it's, they used to sell them in places like HMV. You didn't have this mad online ballot system that everyone's trying to get intensely for. But it was just really a lovely experience. And just huge level of creativity and a great atmosphere. And it was really interesting to be, and it took me a while to clock why it felt different in a completely non-commercialised space, because apart from, one or two banners for Oxfam and WaterAid, the sort of key partner charities, they don't allow any kind of corporate sponsorship, very different to festivals around the world, likes of Coachella in America or anything like that. It's very much got its ethos at the core of it. Obviously, there's been some controversy since with certain comments made by certain bands on stage, but it was a great weekend. And if you want to go, they're going to take a fallow year next year to let the farm rest, but then 2027 they're going to be back.
Robin, are you a regular Glastonbury goer?
You don't need to ask. No, I'm a paid-up member of the Muller School on this. I wouldn't go even if you paid me. I did have some sympathy, though, for Vincent and his fellow festival goers this weekend because they missed out on the mud experience. I mean, in past years, Glastonbury, more often than not, I think, has been absolutely knee-deep in mud. And this weekend, as you say, it was bright sunshine nearly the whole time. And they missed out on that essential part.
I never did a muddy Glastonbury, but
and it is a bit of barometer of climate change because the frequency of muddy Glastonburys is way down.
Yeah. I did a muddy Reading and the first attempt to recreate Woodstock in 1994, which wasn't the one that
second Woodstock too.
It was the second one that went full
the
Lord of the Flies.
Oh yeah.
But the first one in 1994 was just it was Apocalypse Now with worse music. But we will move off because we do know how to enjoy ourselves here on the Monocle Daily, and we're going to continue attempting to divine the thinking of US President Donald Trump with specific reference to the deadline 1 week from today at which the pause he imposed on his eccentric regime of tariffs will elapse. Among his preparatory positioning has been a threat to stick tariffs of 30 or 35% on Japan for some reason, though Japan is apparently at least worthy of consideration. Many of the countries initially targeted have reportedly found it difficult to get anyone in Trump's administration to pick up the phone, and particular difficulties have been experienced by the Heard and McDonald Islands, slapped with a 10% tariff by Trump, as everyone who lives there is a penguin. Robin, first of all, do we as yet perceive any particular rhyme or reason to Trump's tariffs?
No, absolutely none. I mean, the one thing that President Trump is very good at is confused messaging, keeping everybody off balance. Now, there are two schools of thought about this. Some people think that this is just the way he is. He changes his mind twice a day and 3 times on Sundays. Others think that this is an incredibly clever, shrewd strategy to keep his trade partners off balance so that they don't quite know where they are and might be tempted to make more concessions in the hope of getting him to agree to a deal than would otherwise be the case. My own view, for what it's worth, is that it is the tactics of a bully. You threaten people, you make them scared, you intimidate them, and you hope that by doing so they will buckle. Now, that works with some. It doesn't work with others, but then suddenly, the next day you say, I'm not really going to be as horrible as all that, I'm really going to be quite nice, but in return you'll have to do this. So I don't think anybody really knows where they stand.
Vincent, he is claiming within the last hour or two that these tactics that Robin outlines have worked with Vietnam. And I quote from Trump's announcement, "It is my great honour," capital G, capital H, "to announce that I have just made a trade deal," capital D, T, capital D, "with the Socialist Republic of Vietnam." It's going to be a 20% tariff on Vietnamese exports, which is lower than the 46% they had initially been stung with. But it is still a tariff, in return for which the United States, or so Trump is claiming, will get vastly increased market access to Vietnam.
So that's 2 trade deals in 90 days, only about 198 more to go, really,
in a week.
Then? In a week.
I mean, he'd have been an excellent freelance journalist, wouldn't he? It's just like leave everything till the last minute and then try and plough through it all in a massive panic.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's sort of been going on is there is a bit of maybe I'm Spartacus moment here. The way to stand up to a bully is that when eventually the bullied realise that they outnumber the actual bully, the tables can turn, and many of these nations are thinking, he might not still have control of Congress, the Senate next year in the midterms. Then he's into sort of the lame duck portion of his presidency. Do they just sort of wait it out and see? Obviously, the acronym TACO, which has taken hold, Trump always chickens out, waiting to see whether or not he delays again. I think he, interestingly, timing-wise, I think in the sort of week where you've got Americans celebrating Independence Day, and obviously he called the day of the introduction April the 2nd Liberation Day. I think he won't want to, potentially throw the markets into absolute turmoil and make it look as if in this particular week when, he's building up to the I think it's the quincentennial anniversary of America, we're calling it, the 250-year anniversary.
Is that a thing?
It is a thing, okay. Yeah. There is apparently a young producer in his early 20s from Fox News who's running the whole national celebration of it. But I don't think he'll want the economy to really start to tank hard as people are breaking up for summer holidays and trying to celebrate America.
But, Robin, even if the economy does tank hard, and we have seen that happen before at various junctures on his watch, it still doesn't stick to him, does it? The US dollar is, as of right now, or it has just rather posted its worst first two quarters in half a century. Now, you could argue that that's actually working out pretty well for US-based exporters, because people can afford to buy more of their stuff, but it just doesn't stick to him, does it?
The thing that Trump understood very early on, I think, is that the vast majority of people take virtually no interest in politics. And therefore the detail of what he does, and indeed the detail of what happens to the economy, until it results in them losing their jobs, or until it results in the price of the gas station increasing yet further, or the price of eggs indeed remaining high, then it doesn't really affect them that much. I mean, people who vote for Trump and people who support Trump are people who have stuck with him through 2 impeachments, 34 criminal convictions. I mean, these are people who really would vote for him even if he stood in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shot somebody, as he famously said.
Just finally on this, Vincent, is the difficulty for nations in trying to adjust to this that it does basically just boil down to sheer whim on Trump's part? It's he decides he likes some country, so the UK gets a trade deal of sorts. Vietnam gets the framework for whatever this is, where there are other countries he has just decided he has some fearful animus against, like Japan or the Heard and McDonald Islands.
He's all about FaceTime, and it is about making the trips to see him, and that was what Keir Starmer did in Washington very quickly, getting that deal. We know that the likes of Giorgia Meloni has been sort of the pushed forward ambassador for the EU to try and secure the deal for them, but that hasn't worked quite yet. And we know that when it comes to deal making and who he favours, it is more often than not who he has seen recently. It is the people that come and visit him in Mar-a-Lago and tell him how wonderful his gaudy architecture and tastes are. And if you're not willing to kind of go and do that big, knee bending, you are somewhat going to struggle. The interesting one to watch has been the relationship with Mark Carney during this period, because obviously Justin Trudeau at the start of all this was still the Canadian Prime Minister. Then it switched to Mark Carney, someone that Trump likes a winner, and it was not expected initially that Mark Carney could even win that election, but he did a tremendous job winning it. And so Trump seemed to like that this was someone that knew how to win stuff. But even that negotiation with one of America's absolute key trading partners has broken down in the past week or so. So as much as you can, and Mark Carney did spend time with Trump at the G7 in Canada and a visit as well. So even the FaceTime isn't working as much now. So it is all just whim, basically.
Well, sticking sort of with the US, but also pivoting gracefully to this side of the Atlantic, the governments of both the US and the UK have this week been attempting to steer bills through their respective Congress and Parliament, which would to some extent address welfare spending. In the US, Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill Act, its actual name, squeaked through the Senate yesterday, though could yet be unpicked by the House of Representatives. In the UK, a welfare reform bill has been passed by Parliament, but not before a series of climb downs, U-turns and other indignities was the word I wanted, were required to placate mutinous members of the governing Labour Party. Robin, at the very real risk of sounding like a seething libertarian crank, do both these travails illustrate one of the difficulties with welfare spending, which did go up hugely in both countries as a consequence of the pandemic, and quite rightly, is that once you've started spending on it, it's very, very difficult to scale that back.
It is very difficult to scale it back, but I think when I'm in an optimistic frame of mind, I look at what's been happening both in Washington, D.C. and here in London, and I think this is actually parliamentary or representative democracy working in action. This is legislatures saying to the executive power, no, you can't do this because this isn't what we were elected to bring about. Now, in Washington, it's been an incredible mess, and you've had this kind of wheeler-dealing, which only Congress is capable of. And frankly, even though I've tried to follow it, I've completely lost track of which elements of this big, beautiful bill have gone through and have not. In this country, we've seen chaos as well. The big difference, it seems to me, is that in the US, you have a president in his second term, most unlikely to be able to run for a third term, although he still likes to dangle the prospect. In this country, you've got a Prime Minister who's just about to celebrate his first anniversary as Prime Minister with a huge majority in the House of Commons, and the wheels are already falling off his administration. So you've got two very different moments in parliamentary cycles.
I mean, just on that, Vincent, and focusing on the UK, it does seem weird that this was such a bumpy ride for Starmer, who does have that 150-odd seat majority behind him. But is there an aspect of a majority that big that it becomes kind of a trap, in that when it's very, very close,
trap.
Yeah, when it's very, very close, backbenchers don't feel like they can rebel because they don't want to bring down the government they're a part of, whereas when you've got a majority that big, you're going to get an awkward squad who just thinks, yeah, I've got a chance to a more or less consequence-free opportunity to stir up trouble. I
think there are two things in play currently in the Labour Party. The first is, in a year in Downing Street, Keir Starmer has spent an amazing amount of time on international matters in a sort of presidential way, to be honest. A lot of global travel. Part of that was the agenda of resetting Britain after the Brexit and Conservative government, getting out into the world, going to conferences, meeting fellow world leaders, trying to rebuild and sort of rejuvenate Britain. And that has paid dividends. He's now seen as a sort of big figure on the international stage. He's seen as a good bridge again between Europe and the United States. He's managed to sort of, shake off those sort of post-Brexit years by striking new trade deals with the likes of India and America. Now that means that his attention perhaps to the mood and state of the party has been off, and MPs love nothing more, and having worked for one, they love nothing more than being invited for a cosy cup of tea in number 10 Downing Street. We still have MPs who say that they've not actually met Keir Starmer in the Labour Party, which after a year is remarkable. It doesn't take much. Have 10 round for Sunday lunch at Chequers, every week, every other week. They'll absolutely love it. That's the sort of country residence of a British Prime Minister. Party management like that can, small little acts like that can actually pay dividends. And I think the other part that's going on is you've got some MPs who won in places where it'll be very hard, it seems, for them to retain their seats at the next election. These were always places that were reaches for Labour in the 2024 election. And some of those MPs now realise, actually, 5 years isn't a lot of time. If I want to make a mark and make a name for myself, I can try and sort of do it on this. And there's a lot of, worry, genuine worry for people with disabilities, but there is consensus across the House as well that this, the way that PIP is working is with the telephone in particular, testing of this benefit, where we could go online now and see all of the questions, and it tells you which answers to give in order to access that benefit. Now, the problem is it undermines everyone on that benefit, the genuine people as well that need it, because people think you can game it, and so the sort of call is to have in-person assessments once again, but it has all descended into a mess, and you've seen some MPs who I think know that their time will probably be limited in Parliament thinking, well, I can get myself into the headlines a little bit on this one and look like a saviour.
It does also speak to your point, though, Andrew, about trying to limit welfare spending, because in most electorates there are more people who do not receive benefits than who do, and people who don't receive benefits quite often suspect that at least some welfare benefit recipients are fraudsters, are cheating the system, as Vincent suggests. Now, people who are on benefits and who deserve to have them and who are entitled to them obviously see things very differently. Labour MPs emotionally will be on the side of those who do receive benefits, because that's why they went into politics, to help people who needed help. However, the majority of their constituents probably see the world a bit differently, so they are pulled between their heart and their head, if you like. And I think one of the reasons why Keir Starmer has found it so difficult to get these proposals through is that his MPs are being pulled in two different directions. They would like to see the Labour government succeed, but they would also like to be re-elected.
But there are some things that they could have done a better job of selling to the public, particularly young people. The uptick of young people not in education, not in work. And all the data boils out that if you don't get into the employment between 18 and 25, you are then incredibly unlikely to ever get into employment. And creating, again, a lost generation is something that MPs are worried about. But they could have sold that more to the public and got them sort of less hassle to get this through.
Well, now to what the wilting milquetoast citizens of Europe risibly refer to as a heatwave, despite the fact that temperatures across the continent have yet to reach the point at which my fellow Australians would shed their greatcoats and balaclavas and move away from the brazier. Various jurisdictions have implemented emergency measures. In France, where it was in fairness really pretty hot, Paris kept parks open overnight, Marseille ceased charging admission for swimming pools, and Orléans offered free visits to air-conditioned museums. Robin, first of all, at what point, as the representative European at this table, do you start calling it hot?
It depends what you're used to, doesn't it? If, as a Brit, you're not really used to temperatures going much above, in old money, 80 degrees Fahrenheit, in new money, 30 degrees Celsius, then anything above that feels very, very hot. I have lived at various times in Africa, in the Middle East. I have, for my sins, actually been in Baghdad in August when the temperature reached 50 degrees Celsius. I have been on an oil tanker in the Gulf where the temperature on deck reached 55 degrees Celsius. That is hot.
Even an Australian is not going to quibble with that.
Good.
That sounds distinctly warmish.
Yeah, it was warmish. I mean, what puzzles me about the European reaction to what we've been through over the last couple of days is that dealing with temperatures of this kind actually isn't that difficult. You draw the curtains, you pull down the blinds, you close the windows, and you try to stay out of the sun, and you wait for the temperatures to go down.
So where are you, Robin, just to follow that up quickly, on the air conditioning discourse? There is kerfuffle in some European quarters that Europe should adjust to this, because most of Europe, or quite a lot of Europe, remains un-air conditioned.
Yeah, the green bit of me is not very keen on air conditioning because it uses up huge amounts of energy, and of course it pumps hot air out of buildings into the environment, so it increases the temperature on the outside. The personal comfort bit of me quite likes air conditioning when the temperatures do rise above a certain level. But look, in my own home over the last couple of days, we don't have air conditioning. We do have a portable fan, which has been on for a couple of hours at the hottest part of the day, but we've actually managed okay.
Vincent, would you be tempted by such remedies as a night in the park or a free swimming pool or a museum visit?
I mean, it was actually quite nice at Glastonbury to be sleeping sort of outside in a tent, because it was actually quite nice and cool in the evenings doing that. And
you weren't camped next to somebody with bongos.
No, gladly not. But no, yeah, swims absolutely lovely. I always think as well, not to overlook, I know it's sort of counterintuitive, but the reason the summer blockbuster season exists is because it was the air conditioning that got Americans into cinemas in their summer heat. Obviously, places that, because the equipment has to be kept very cool. So that is why we have summer blockbusters. So, you can always go, if it's a really sort of stuffy evening and you just want to do something cool, you can go and chill out in a cinema. So that's another option as well. But yeah, swim always works pretty well too.
So those are our tips for staying cool. Either just close the damn windows or go for a swim.
Or go to the cinema.
Or go to the cinema.
Yeah.
I think I would go to an air-conditioned cinema only in the circumstances in which they were not showing any actual films. Robin Lustig and Vincent McAvenny, thank you both for joining us. Finally, on today's show, a look at the rise of modest fashion in Indonesia and beyond. As the name suggests, modest fashion is characterised by loose clothing which covers the skin. While not necessarily synonymous with Muslim dress, in recent years the industry has grown rapidly, particularly in Islamic countries. In Indonesia, where 87% of the people are Muslims, the modest clothing industry has reached $20 billion in revenue and is growing 18% per year. And now the country has its sights set on international markets. Monocle's Belinda Johanna tells us more.
Modest fashion transcends mere adherence to sartorial rules, and it is anything but a compromise on style. The growing appetite for modest fashion fueled by rising spending power among Muslim consumers. Shifting global aesthetics and the amplifying effect of social media has positioned it as one of the industry's most compelling narratives. The State of Global Islamic Economy 2023 report reveals a telling trajectory in which Muslim consumers spent $318 billion on fashion in 2022. With projections forecasting a further 6.1% climb to $428 billion by 2027, the sector's momentum is undeniable. Indonesia, where 87% of the population identifies as Muslim, is doubling down on its ambitions as a halal economy powerhouse, now ranking third globally in the sector. Indonesian modest fashion exports have gained notable tractions in recent years, with homegrown brands making waves regionally and beyond, such as Batik Scarves, which expanded to Malaysia in 2023 and later launched in Singapore the following year. Then there is Dian Pelangi, a designer who has carved out a presence not just across Asia, but as far afield as Europe, proving the global appeal of Indonesian modest wear. Indonesia has set its sights on 5 key Middle Eastern markets: Iran, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and Egypt, as a strategic export destinations for its Muslim fashion offerings. These targeted expansions reflect both the region's power, growing appetite for modest wear, and Indonesia's ambition to position itself as a global leader in faith-inspired design. Reni Yenita, Director General of Small, Medium, and Multi-Industries, expresses strong confidence in Indonesia's modest fashion sector, with ready-to-wear sectors employing 2.7 million workers across 569,000 businesses, according to 2022 data from the Micro and Small Industry Profile on Indonesian Manufacturing Industry Statistics. This strong foundation positions our local modest fashion industry to dominate its domestic market, Yenita explained. We're pleased to welcome Franca Surya, a fashion expert and co-founder of Makamari, a leading voice in Indonesia's creative economy and modest fashion movement. Franca will share her insights on how local designers can succeed in both in domestic markets and internationally.
Everyone in the mainstream now try to tap in the market because they are surprised that this market is that big. They say, oh, so this is not like a small economy anymore. If you don't include modesty in a fashion show or in a collection, it's as if you are kind of ignoring the big crowd that is now existing in Indonesia. In the past, modesty, maybe people say it's traditional, it's not cool enough, it's not part of the urban. But right now, because they see a lot of young women wearing trendy clothes, but they can still keep their modesty, the hijabi is a part of urban life now. Even when you see the celebrity who never used modest clothes and now they are proud to wear it also, to be part of the big
niche. I don't say niche anymore. It's become so big. Yeah, it's a part of you're trendy if you're modest. But right now, like, our challenge is to put the products and the brands into the market abroad. I think everybody around the world is competing with the cheaper products from China, a lot of them, right? And then in the Europe, we have Turkey, which is their style is very relevant with the market. They export a lot of products to around the world. Indonesia, we're trying. Yes, there are some brands who directly they have the funding. They open a store abroad, which is good. But right now, what we are thinking more about how to help the brands that is not having that much funding for their products to be available abroad. But I think with a good incubation program or these things, it can work. That's why I do the project that I do is called Modest Fashion 100. We are informing the brands about these things, connecting the brands with the buyers. It will started in a bigger scale, I guess, this year. While Indonesia's modest fashion industry shows tremendous promise fueled by an abundance of emerging talent, realizing its full potential will require sustained collaboration between designers and government. With a global attention shifting towards Southeast Asia as a wellspring cultural innovation, Indonesia stands poised to emerge as a defining force in contemporary modest fashion, blending tradition with forward-looking design. From Monocle, I'm Belinda Johanna.
Thanks, Belinda. And that is all for this edition of the Monocle Daily. Thanks to our panellists today, Robin Lustig and Vincent McAvenny. Thanks also to Natalia Gumanyuk. Today's show was produced by Chris Chermak and researched by Henry King. Our sound engineer was Elliot Greenfield. I'm Andrew Muller here in London. The Daily returns at the same time tomorrow. Thanks for listening.